All right. Good afternoon. You guys are having a wonderful day today. Welcome to another edition of Nail School. I'm going to work on some fundamental acrylic application. And if you guys, again, have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. The team will be here to help you guys out. What I want to be able to do first is break this down into three fundamentals. I want to break this down into preparation, application, and finishing. I'm always going to want to start by pushing cuticles back. And then once I'm done doing that, I want to be able to use my electric file to gently remove shine from the surface of the nail. So the pressure I'm actually going to be working with is gentle. I'm using my arbor band like I'm tickling the inside of my wrist, right? That's the type of pressure that I'm actually going to be working with around the perimeter of the nail. And then I'm just going to lightly feather, right, from corner to corner using a very gentle, I would say like pressure. So I'm barely feathering away the shine on the surface of the nail. I don't want this to be super aggressive. If you can feel like if you were going to take the arbor band and just tickle the inside of your finger right here, that's the type of pressure I'm going to be using. The nice thing about using the arbor bands is that they're super sanitary. You can change them out after each use, right? So after I'm done working on my client, I could literally take this off, throw it away, and then put a brand new one back on, right? So instead of wasting hand file every single time, I'm going to be able to change my arbor bands out on a regular basis. Once we're done removing shine from the surface of the nail, what I want to be able to do is cleanse it, right? So we're going to use swipe. We're going to cleanse the surface of the nail. I'm going to scrub this, removing all the oils and contaminants. And this is going to set us up for protein bond application. Okay, so I want to be able to apply 2 coats. So I want to be able to come down from cuticle to free edge, right? Nice, gentle coat. I'm going to do this on all 10 fingers. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to apply 1 more coat from cuticle to free edge. Boom, just like that. Okay, that's prepped and ready to go. All right, so when we are getting into application, one of the most important things we have to be able to do is get the right consistency. So you'll notice I'm going to be working with Cover Pink. If I submerge my brush, I'm working with a number 12, the Signature Series brush. If I submerge my brush all the way and I tap, right, I'm loading one side, right? So if I tap one side, if I pull down and bounce inside the surface of the powder, you're going to see that I'm going to get a nice even bead on one side of my brush. I don't want to go through dragging through the surface. You can see you get dry spots. I get a little bit tighter here. I don't want to harpoon the surface, right? Because what ends up happening is you end up getting acrylic jammed up all around. I want something on, again, like if I flatten my brush out, I want to be able to get it on one side. So if I submerge, lightly tap, if I pull down, bounce, 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 you're going to notice that I load one side of the brush, right? And that is going to make a difference. I appreciate that, Kim. Thank you. It's good to be back. So for those of you guys that don't know, I've been nursing an injury for the past 6 months, finally getting back to full strength. All right, so again, right, we don't want to, and it's really important, you'll notice when I hold my brush, I want to be able to hold this like I'm writing, right? I want to be able to rest this in the crease of my hand for good balance. I don't want to hold the brush way out like this. And then, you know, again, I don't want to bounce inside the powder like this. Bouncing inside the powder, like this is, look how uneven this is. This is messy, right? And it clogs your brush up. We want to be able to submerge, tap one side. We want to be able to use the flat side of the brush to pull, and I'm physically pulling down. Look at this, right? I just want to show you. You see that divot that I made inside the powder? Let me flatten this back out. I need to physically pull down into the powder and then bounce inside that divot so that I load up the brush, right, with something even that is going to release. Look at this. If I set this down, it's going to release really well from my brush without sticking to the brush or running down the sides. All right, so it's really important when you're working with acrylic to understand that we're trying to get the product to run from this position to this position in the least amount of effort. Too many beginners make the mistake when they set it down of trying to control it. You want a self-leveling nature. So this is what I mean. Now you'll notice, right, if I turn the camera to the side, you can see how my finger is angled down towards the towel. I don't have it flat. If I was to set it flat, look how thick that cuticle area. If I have the finger pointed down like this, you see how I can create that nice taper around the perimeter of the nail. That's what I want to be able to create. So if I submerge my brush, I lightly tap, I pull down, bounce, bounce, bounce. I count 1, 2, 3, right? It's a little warm inside here. I just want to show you something. You see the space? You see that little bit of a space that I have around the perimeter, right? And you can also see the bead slowly moving in this direction. I haven't done anything. All I did was just set it to the surface with a little bit of space around the cuticle area. Even if one side is starting to move, not a big deal. But the most important thing is I'm getting the product to move in this direction, down towards the free edge. What we're trying to establish, right? Let me bring my chalkboard out right here. Right? You'll notice if I have the finger pointed down at a 45-degree angle, if this was the natural nail right here, right? Cuticle area. If I set the bead down at the cuticle area and my brush is flat, right, while the finger is pointed down at a 45-degree angle, I'm going to be able to create this, a nice tapered, naturally tapered cuticle area. If this was the back end of the cuticle, we're trying to create this. I don't want this, right? I need it tapered so that it self-levels, right? Again, you want to try to create a nice flush area around the whole perimeter of the nail. It needs to self-level in all directions, right? You're trying to get it to move this way while the product is moving down towards the free edge. So when we are working, it's important, right? It's important that we hold the finger down, okay? It's also important to get the right consistency. So if I submerge my brush, lightly tap, pull down, bounce, bounce, bounce. I count 1, 2, 3, I release. Look at the motion. I'm using a really light, look at this. I'm barely sliding the tip of the brush towards the perimeter. Look at that. So I'm using this motion, right, as the product starts to move. It'll get to a point where I'll be able, right, to use the tip of the brush just to lightly start to brush everything forward. Every time I touch this, look at this, I wipe my brush. Every time I pull forward, I wipe my brush. And you'll notice as I continuously use even pressure, the product will self-level perfectly. Like what I'll be able to create, again, and you'll notice all my sides, like all these little, everything is rounded off, rounded off, rounded off. And I'm also able to create a nice upper arch naturally, right? The biggest problem that a lot of beginners run into is this. They keep the finger too flat. They keep the finger too flat. And then what ends up happening is this. They take their brush, right? They'll end up dragging through the surface. And then what they'll do is they won't even have, look, I'm not even connected. They'll set it down and then just go like this. And then you'll see how everything, look at that. Look how thick and nasty that is. Everything is going to run in this direction. So like, and if you keep adding to this, all you're doing is building a cake that's not going to cure. You're just stacking product on top of product on top of product. We don't want to be in this position. If we're in this position, you're never going to be able to build a nail successfully. In order for you to build a nail successfully where you don't have to worry about really filing that much into shape, you have to have the right, again, angle of attack. You have to have the right consistency, right? In order to get that, again, like you'll notice, I have my brush, right? I submerge my brush, I lightly tap. Again, I'm balancing, right? Like I'm even holding it here so that when I bounce into the surface, I'm able to get it. Look at this. I have my hand out, I have contact. Look at this. My finger is pointed down, my brush is straight. I set it down slow. I just want to show you, look at this motion. I'm barely touching the cuticle and I'm contouring my brush as I am walking around the perimeter of the nail. Don't worry about this area. We're just focusing on this, right? So all of you guys that are learning, what we're trying to do, and look at this, if I was to flatten this out, I just want to show you something. If I was to flatten this out and then lightly pull, do you see how it creates, right? That shape? Like, see how everything, it's like a downward ramp this way. Everything is getting nice and tight around this cuticle area. Everything is thick at the stress area where we need the most support. That's what you want to be able to accomplish. In order to be able to do that, you have to have good balance. You have to be able to have the right consistency of acrylic. And it doesn't matter what you're working with. Like you could be working with, look at this, I'll grab a clear product. Like the more liquid you use, the more chances of the product running into perfection, right? So if I'm taking, again, a speed clear, if I was to submerge my brush and I was to pull down and grab myself, I don't really have to wait. I could just set this down, release, and then lightly touch, lightly touch, lightly touch, lightly touch. I'm just barely touching around the perimeter to get it tight. And then what I could do is really start focusing on trying to brush this as tight to the edges. Look at this. As I brush those edges down and all the way through, what I'm actually able to do is get it tight around the perimeter of the nail. I'm not concerned about getting it all the way to the front end. I could always get what I call a blending bead. Look at this. You get a blending bead and set that down into the area that I need, right? And then allow that to set and then use the body of the brush to walk it from side to side to fill in all the negative space, to fill in the area that is required. When you're learning how to do nails, you have to get this area tight. This is the most important area, right? So, you know, always with a lot of my students when we're starting, you know, we're focusing on fundamentals, but just remember, right, when you're working around this area, we're trying to get it. And again, how close, if I set the bead down to the area here with a little bit of space, this gives me enough room to use the tip of the brush, right, to slide this as close to the perimeter of the nail as I possibly can. That's what we're trying to achieve. And then as the product starts moving in this direction, you have to remember that it's also self-leveling towards the side walls as well. Okay? So, you know, practice, again, picking up beads. You have to, again, learn, right? Flatten this out, take your brush. If I'm going with something, say, large to cover a large surface, well then I barely want to touch this. I want to come down. Look at this. I could grab myself something massive, right? Look at same thing. Barely touch this. Pull down, bounce, 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 bounce. I'm gonna pick up the same size bead. If I'm going for something smaller, right, like for a pinky, well then what I would do is I would maybe press this a few times, and then I would only have to bounce a couple times. Look at the size of bead that I'm actually able to pick up. Again, press this a few times, only bounce a couple times. I'm going to get the same size. If I need something smaller, I'm going to try to remove as much liquid from the tip of the brush as I possibly can. I might only have to barely touch it. See that? To get myself something super tiny. I'm going to try to remove as much of this as I possibly can. And again, barely, and I'm always using a bouncing motion. Look at that, right? Trying to create consistency in size. When you're going for larger size, you want to be able to load your brush up with as much liquid as you possibly can. All right, let me just do this real fast. I'm going to hold my brush. When I'm pouring liquid inside my dish, right, I want to hold it to the ferrule of the brush. That way, when I dispense it inside my Dappen dish, right, I can pour it inside without it spilling down the side. You'll also notice the amount of monomer I have inside is only about half. And so for all of you guys that are in school right now, or just got your license, or in the salon, or you're someone who's working out of home, and you're frustrated with, again, the way that acrylic works, you're not alone. It takes time, and again, getting the fundamentals right so that we're able to get it down perfect. Okay, so remember, we prep this nail. How do we build a nail? Well, what we want to be able to do is, I want to be able to get my form, and I'm just going to place the tab underneath. If I pre-pinch the front, it's going to create, again, a nice handle. If I open this up, I'll be able to hold the sides. This is going to allow me to come underneath, and I have this at an angle. Look at this. All I have to do is use my finger, my middle finger, to tilt it until it touches the very, very free edge. You'll notice how straight that form is on. What we want to be able to do in order to get great consistency, I'm going to show you something. Right? If I submerge my brush, lightly tap, maybe bounce a couple times, I lightly touch the surface. When I go ahead and set this to the form, it doesn't run. I want to walk it from the top, get it even. Look at this. I'm walking it from the top of the bead. Look at this. From the top of the bead, slide it even with the growth channel. From the top of the bead, slide it. Top of the bead, slide it. Top of the bead, slide. This is going to give me a free edge that is absolutely flush. Now, you'll notice, if I want to tighten this up, I could drag this out, right? If I want to round off the very, very front end, maybe create an almond shape, all I'm doing is tapering the shape to make this as even as I possibly can. But you're going to notice that when I'm working with forms, I want to build a tip that is going to be flush to the surface of the nail. Just like I was working on one of these tips, right? We're trying to replicate creating something as flat as this. Okay, so now once we have the tip on, we want to be able, again, to create the body. So if I submerge my brush and I pull down and I get myself a nice bead, right? If I set this down, I have, again, enough space where I'm actually able to, look at this, slide, 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 slide. I'm barely touching to get it as close to the cuticle area while the bead moves all the way down to the stress area. Look where I'm pulling from the front of the bead. Every time I pull through this, I wipe my brush. Every time I pull through the sides, I wipe my brush. Now I could actually use a little bit of body, right, of the brush right here, dead center, just to walk through to make sure that I have everything as even as I possibly can. Continue. Now, I don't obviously have enough product right here at the front. So what we're going to do, we're going to get a blending bead. What I've always taught is get the same size pearl, wait a couple of seconds. I'm gonna take my brush backwards. Look at this, right here in the area that it's needed, and brush back. Now I could use the body of the brush to walk that excess product all the way to the front. Boom. Look at this. All I'm doing is blending it in, making sure that we have great coverage. I can continue to blend it back just to make sure that it's as even as possible. Use the body of the brush, and you can see the contact. Look at this, the contact that I have with my hand. This is going to give me the ability to walk the product over the surface without shaking. And I want to be able to try to get this as even as I possibly can. You know, at this point too, if you needed to add, if you were light in areas, you could always just take a small blending bead and just brush it through, because you've already created the right structure. So if there's anything that you need to add in any areas, again, take off most of the liquid, right? Get a small bead. You could add, look at this, I just added to the surface and blended it through. So all that's going to do is add just a slight bit of volume. But what you'll notice is that like everything is super tight all the way around. My shape is there. My side walls are going to be really, really even. I have great shape all the way through. The structure is not going to take long for me to file into perfection, okay? That's what we want to be able to get to, right? All the fundamentals of us doing this leads to you doing this, whether it's on a form or on a tip. I'm going to leave my brush in my dish. Really important. And again, once you're done working on your client, again, I leave my brush here, right? After I'm done filing and getting them dialed with top coats, what I'll do is after leaving my brush in for the file finishing surface part of the service, I like to, again, use the towel to kind of scrape out any sort of loose acrylic that's built up on here. I could use the tip, again, the monomer that's in the dish, and continue work the brush to a nice, again, soft, supple, again, you know, brush consistency so that you can continue to work on future surfaces without worried about acrylic getting jammed inside your brush. I'm going to throw this out. I'm going to cover up my monomer so that we don't contaminate it. Boom. You'll notice that once I remove the form, I still have a little bit of flexibility here to be able to get this as tight as I possibly can. Look at this, right, which is nice. If you're doing any type of, and this is almost set, it feels again like velvet over the surface, which is great. It takes about, great question, how long does it take to cure? It takes about 5 minutes, right? So you have to remember, you're not doing, but it's like by the time you're done doing the 10th finger, this is ready to file. Since I'm only doing one, I have to wait until it's set, but you'll notice that, right, there's a dull sound. It's not, we want it to sound like clicking. That's still dull, right? So just need a few more, I'd say about 1 more minute, but you have about 30 seconds of play time before it, again, doesn't move. Depending how cold it is, it could be up to 45 seconds of play time. And then it can take anywhere, depending on how warm the temperature is in your salon or in your workspace. It could take anywhere from 3.5 to, I'd say, 4.5 minutes, but usually around the 4-minute mark is when you're ready to go. You'll notice, there we go, right? That sounds pretty dialed in. I'm going to take my hand file, and what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we file our sides even. And I'm always like really focusing on trying to get it as even as I can, all the way to the center of the nail. Boom, and then just slightly round this off so that we get that really nice almond shape. To get underneath, you can see how flat, look at this, you can see how that shelf, how flat that shelf is running all the way up to the very, very top. Now, general rule of thumb, you want to turn your customer's hand to the side, and I'll show you why. When you're filing the lower arch, we want the file to run parallel to the finger at the lowest point, right? Look at this. So it looks like this from the top, but when you turn to the side, if I line this here and I keep contact with that lowest part and I continue to file, keeping pressure underneath, I'm eventually going to reach the end of the growth channel, right? The very end of that growth channel coming out. Look how nice and straight I'm actually able to get that. I want to do the same thing on the opposing side. You'll notice here, I'll give you a side profile. Look at this. So the lowest part is that you see how it hangs down? I want it to come dead even off that end. If I line my file parallel to the finger at that lowest point and file even, I'll be able to get it dead straight. Keep contact, continue to file, keeping it parallel to the finger. And then as I'm moving through underneath that lower arch, you're going to notice that I'm actually going to be able to file this thing really, really straight coming off the end. That's why it's super easy. When you turn the hand to the side, you're going to get a better view right here. See that? Trying to get this as even as I possibly can. The biggest mistake that a lot of beginners make is they do this. Once the nail is done, they take their hand file and they start filing in the sides like this at an angle. And then they continue to file and they continue to file. And then what ends up happening, you see that little step right here in the corner? That's a problem. We don't want that on our sides right here, right? And again, the reason why this is created is because the individual didn't take the time to turn the hand to the side and line the file at the lowest point and file evenly and parallel to that growth channel until it reaches. They made the mistake of just coming into the side and hacking that edge, right? So you don't want that. That's a big problem. Okay, so once it's done, then what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and switch out to my X cut, right? This is, again, a safety bit. I'm going to run my electric file. I'm right-handed, so I'm working and forward. Just like I'm writing, again, I want to look down the side profile. I want to be able to try to get this as even as I can down the barrel of the nail. Done. I want to come down, right, the C curve, looking down the barrel of the nail in one direction. I'm not going side to side. I'm coming in one direction to get that C curve as even as I can, right, down the barrel of the nail so we can get that nice and even. When I'm working around the cuticle area, I don't go side to side. One direction, reducing bulk, one direction, one pulling towards myself. I'm not going side to side. And then I follow through the rest of the nail. I'm done. Like, once I have the majority of the bulk taken out, the nice thing about this is that, right, like I don't really need a lot of hand filing at this point. It's going to be really easy for me to blend my cuticle areas. Done. Nice and flush. And what I mean by that is, here, getting tight, right? I don't want to ledge. If I take my fingernail and I run it to the back, if my finger gets stuck, that ledge will cause lifting. So you want to be able to work the area so that, again, I don't really have that much to file around the perimeter. I'm going to file down my left side in one direction this way. I'm going to file my right side. I'm going into the body and letting it fall down. It's almost like I'm filing at an angle. I file this at an angle this way. You can see all my file marks are coming in this direction. Same thing on the opposite side. We're trying to reduce as much bulk as we possibly can. And then last but not least, what we want to be able to do is I want to look down this profile here, right? I want to try to get this as even as I can, right, on both sides. I need to look down the client's profile, down that profile, to make sure that we're going to get the sides as, again, as even as we can. Right, got that as straight as possible. I'm going to make a peace sign, rest this in between my knuckles, rest the hand file on the surface from the back end. File by keeping my thumb pressure on the surface. That way you're going to be able to get a really nice, right, even structure from side to side. And then again, I could use, you can see, if I was just to lightly buff out the edges, what we're going to set ourselves up with is a perfectly sculpted almond-shaped nail, no tips, right? This is going to be a perfect canvas for you to do any design work on. If you're doing your gel top coats over the surface, make sure that you're going to use basically a nice, use the protein bond over the surface, right? That'll prevent your gel top coats and everything from chipping, all right? But that's what you want to be able to do, okay? All right, if you guys have any questions, again, feel free to get in touch with us, www.youngnails.com. Remember, for you guys to get education on a regular basis, make sure to follow, like, and subscribe. You have to subscribe in order to get notifications and all the classes. Usually Wednesdays are the days that I come on board. Karen has some amazing stuff that she's doing on a regular basis. Both of us are, again, tuned into helping you guys get to that next level. I look forward to working with you guys soon. And again, any questions, feel free to comment, and we will definitely get back to you. Really, really appreciate you guys tuning in. Look forward to the next session. Have a wonderful day.